Well, John, nice to see you. It's been a while.
Nice seeing you too, Mike. How have you been?
I've been okay, thank you. It's challenging times, as you know, for all of us.
I've really been following lots of conversation that has been happening globally. If you look at the global media platform online, there are lots of discussions happening. And I must say that I gained this interest of following keenly on matters to do with the carbon market, simply because, I was born and brought up in Marungu. And I am a community leader, a community member, a resident of Marungu location, born and brought up in Marungu. Yeah, and I'm one of those lucky ones who have gone to school, gone all the way to the university and all that. That is Marungu location, where we have one of the pioneer carbon credit projects, the Kasigau Corridor REDD+ project, where it's located. And I've really seen lots of positive impacts of this project to the local community. There's a lot of socioeconomic empowerment that has happened, lots of good stories that we can stand out and tell. Yeah. So far from that, there are those recent attacks on the project through some human rights activists who are trying to lodge in some allegations. And I know you went over that hurdle. So I was following keenly, trying to see how the market could be picking up.
I hope I can add some clarity. We'll do our best to walk ourselves through a conversation and get and figure out what we can figure out. I think just before we start, John, and you've done some of it, but just for the purposes of anybody that views this that has not visited Kasigau or has not visited Kenya, you as you say have been there for the last 27 years since we first showed up, and of course our work was really close to Maungu in the early years, and now has broadened our impact significantly. But could you just paint a picture a little bit for people about what life is like in a village like Marungu, both 27 years ago, if you can remember, and now? What is life like in that rural Kenya?
Okay, thank you. So even from my name, it being John Mwakima, that tells you that I am a local resident from Taita Taveta County. So when the Wildlife Works project was being established back then in 1997, I was in primary school then. So I have been able to follow what has been happening, and I can indeed paint a picture of before and after. Back then, we had lots of issues before the Kasigau REDD+ project was established. Looking at even the status of our education facility in the ward, they were all looking dilapidated. In terms of the infrastructure, it was terrible. Looking at the school that I was in, that is a Marungu Primary School, it was in a very poor state. When I was completing my class 8, that is a KCPE, when I was doing my KCPE, it was bad. But thanks to the Kasigau Corridor REDD+ project, because since its inception, there's a lot of transformation that has happened around that specific school. Lots of facelifting was done in that facility. When we were schooling, some of the classrooms did not even they had earthen floors, you can imagine. Yeah. We had people, or even some of the students, having issues to do with jiggers, simply because the condition that they were schooling in wasn't the best. But when the community agreed to enroll themselves into the REDD+ project, from the gains or from the proceeds of the credit sales, and we have lots of schools, that is to mention on the schools. If you look at the community, initially people did not appreciate things to do with conservation work, but now they're able to appreciate what it means not to cut down trees. Yeah, they have joined the call to have the forests conserved. Yeah, simply because they understand that it is from conserving these forests, it is from taking care of the trees that we have around, that's where now they can be able to get some funds through the REDD Plus project. Yeah, so there's a lot of socioeconomic transformation that has happened. Water projects have been implemented. Initially, people could only rely on the government to do the projects for them. But looking at how things are currently, were it not for the REDD Plus project, wouldn't have been where we are right now as far as development is concerned. Talk about scholarships. The scholarships that have been given to the children from Marungu. We are talking of people who are proud of themselves because they are earning, they're able to take care of their families thanks to the Kasigau Corridor REDD Plus project. So indeed, there's a lot that is happening across all the sectors. The locals have equally embraced the smart farming techniques because there is a demonstration farm that is owned by Wildlife Works in the village. People are able now to learn how they can equally cope with the climate change impact in terms of the kind of farming adaptation techniques that they can embrace. So there is a lot that we can talk of. The health sector as well. Yeah, people used only to rely on the contributions. Like you have to do a fundraise for you to assist somebody who is sick or ailing, cannot meet medical bills. But here we are, through the carbon credit project, access to medical services is now a reality. Some of the health facilities around, they have equally been upgraded. Yeah, talk of a recent launch that we did in Maungu Model Health Center, where we had even staff quarters being built through the REDD Plus project. So the personnel are able to stay within the locality of the facility, and they're able to offer emergency services with ease, as opposed to somebody having to rush from home to come and offer medical services. So there are lots of positive stories that we can say, thanks to the Kasigau Corridor REDD Plus project, and thanks to carbon credit. The benefits are they're big, they're huge benefits.
Yeah, thank you, John. And then also, one of the things from my own perspective, even when I was beginning many years ago, it was clear that the climate was changing even then. I remember back in those days, in the late 90s, the community relied heavily on food aid, oftentimes because the crops would fail because of lack of rain. My impression is that situation is just getting worse, but as time passes, and it is becoming increasingly difficult for communities to rely on their traditional farming methods. And as you say, that's why we are working with the community on the smart farming approach. Could you just explain a little bit of how that climate change has affected your community in their everyday life and forced you to look for other ways to thrive?
Okay, so if you have to do a flashback and we go back some 20, 30 years ago, we used to have, really consistent weather patterns. Yeah, people could know the season to plant. They could know when to expect bumpy harvests. They could know when to plant the sorghums, and they could all know what to expect as far as the seasons are concerned. But as a result of the climate change, the situation is really bad on the ground, because we have had quite a number of times people doing the normal timing of the seasons, just to go there to their farms, prepare their farms in readiness of the season. It pours a little bit and people have really plowed their farms, expecting that the rains will go on, but to their disappointment, the rains just stop. Yeah, so this has led to loss of losses counted by the local community. People have given up on the traditional farming that they used to do. And, they are trying to look at what could be the other alternatives that could be out there. Now, if you are to look at the poverty levels of the people from this area. This is a community that has hugely relied on the traditional farming methods. So if you're to tell them to look for alternative ways of getting, some food on the table, at times it could be challenging. The only solution that would first come to their mind was maybe to go into the bush, do some game poaching, which is illegal, or cut down some trees and make some charcoal for sale, again, which is making the matters worse as far as climate change is concerned. So because of, again, the coming of the REDD Plus project and the continuous sensitization that has been going on, you'll find that they will not think of first going into the forest to make charcoal or going after game meat. Yeah, they have now been taught on how they can, adopt to some of these smart farming methods. There is still a lot of gap. They still need a lot of support. Yeah, and this is why I'm really worried when I hear that the carbon market is being targeted by some activists out there, that there are some sciences being introduced which are against the carbon market. And I think that's why we're having this conversation today. So indeed, they know that the effect of climate change, the impact of climate change, they can only get through this if they collaborate with like-minded organizations like Wildlife Works in conserving the environment. And they know that by so doing, they can get incentivized, yeah? They can get some monies to get them going as they contribute to the overall goal of net zero.
That's good, John. Thanks very much for that. So maybe that's a good transition for us to start talking about the market and for me to share what I can share. I think what we have seen a little bit recently in the voluntary carbon market, which is the part of the carbon market that we have operated in since the beginning, is really that market, in our opinion, and in the opinion of many people involved in its creation, was about how do we get finance to solve difficult problems that are not likely to be solvable by government regulation in the global north. The governments in the global north can make rules to as they should, to force the significant emissions that come from the global north, which are by far the most significant, as we all know. They can make regulation and enforcement to reduce those, but their reach into the global south is traditionally through aid, and aid in a way that just essentially addresses challenges as they arise, and so the idea of the voluntary market was, well, maybe we can connect the wealth in the north to solving this problem in the global south on a voluntary basis. So not relying on regulation of governments, not relying on agreements made at the UN level, but really relying on everyone's understanding that we live in a collective environment and that we're all subject to the same challenges that climate change is bringing, and to see how far that mechanism could go. How creative and innovative could people be in driving finance directly to those people in the global south that need access to new ways to live and to finance their activities. And so it was very clear at the beginning when we started that message. So that message was very clear. I feel a little bit it's gotten lost. I feel it's become so fractionalized, and it's become so factionalized, and so and the idealists on different sides of the argument have all weighed in, most of whom live in the global north and probably have never been to a community like yours and don't understand the challenges and the urgency of this solution and the timeliness of the voluntary market in bringing that solution to a community like yours. And they're willing to pontificate in a way that seems completely inappropriate for the urgency of the problem. And I guess I wanted to just, as a member of the Global North, apologize to you. I mean, and it seems a bit like, not that I'm in charge of what goes on up here, but it seems almost unbelievable in some ways how this conversation has evolved in a way that is stopping something from happening that was actually doing what it had purported to do, because of lots of reasons, purported reasons, ideology, bad actors, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to say, is there a view from the South of this activity, of this delay, this uncertainty? What's the perspective from the ground about this in terms of the science and the legal frameworks, and how do you perceive what's going on right now in this conversation in the global North?
To us, this one, we are caught by surprise. We never expected it to reach where it is right now. And what pains the most is that we are viewing ourselves as partners, towards mitigating the climate change impact. But it's like now the global North is not viewing us partners. It's like they feel like they are dumping monies where there is no impact per se, if we are to put that one in quotes. So it is really painful to see that there's a conversation that is taking place in the global North. We, as members from the global South who understand the contribution that we are making, and we understand that even the wrath that we are facing as far as climate change impacts are concerned is as a result of activities that are happening in the global North. So why aren't we being consulted? Why aren't there, deliberate efforts to hear our voices, as some of the statements are being made by some of the influential bodies in the global North? For instance, the recent statement by SBTI. We're wondering, how can they, release a statement, a report out there saying that there is negligible impact of carbon credit as far as mitigating the climate change impact is concerned? Why aren't they coming to the ground and gather information from us and interview us and talk to us and see for themselves, the benefits that are being seen on the ground as a result of the carbon credit projects? So from our end, we feel like the global North, they are being a little bit selfish. I'm sorry to say that. And it's like we are losing direction altogether. We expected that, they make deliberate efforts of engaging the leaders from the global South as far as this conversation of carbon market is concerned. But we are surprised that all of a sudden revenue is not coming in, simply because there is some science statements being, thrown left, right, and center. And if you look at it keenly, it's like there are some members of the global North, some new entrants, some scientists, I'm sorry to say, that they feel like they want to be recognized, or they want to be, to be relevant in this discussion. But for them to be relevant, it's important that they come down, they understand why the carbon credit mechanism was established. They understand the science, the initial science, they understand it very well, and they look at the benefits that have accrued on the ground. They hear the voices of the indigenous communities and the local communities at the village level in the global South. It is equally saddening if you look at Kenya, for instance. Recently, the president, His Excellency William Samoei Ruto, has really been active on matters to do with carbon market. We have even set up a legislation, to guide how the funds are supposed to be managed, how the voice of each stakeholder in the carbon space is supposed to be listened to, yeah, how each one is supposed to get a share of the proceeds coming from the carbon market. So that shows even the goodwill that we are having from the leadership of this country. But unfortunately, it's like whatever we are doing, the global north is not appreciating that. Yeah, they want to trash all the efforts that have gone into preserving our environment, conserving our forests, looking at the change of mindset that is being witnessed at the community level. It's like they're not seeing that. Yeah, so to us, it's really disappointing. We feel disrespected, and we feel that it is high time the global north pauses a little bit to listen to the voices from the global south. And we think it's high time they do that before they mess the system altogether.
Thank you, John. That's very strong. I mean, we don't want to pause too long, though, because the pause is the problem, right?
Yeah.
But it is clear, excuse me, it seems clear to me that there's a fear-based decision-making happening in the global north, that and in that fear-based approach where you're worried whether you're making the perfect decision because you're worried that your reputation will be tainted by something that may or may not ever occur, or that you might be accused of, whether that's true or not. It seems in that fear-based environment, people do lose sight of the hope and the reality of the solutions that have been deployed in the global south through the carbon market mechanism. And they want to focus on the negatives and not recognize how successful that mechanism that was designed has been for many communities around the world in the last 15 years. And I feel that is partly why they're not engaging, because they're a little bit paralyzed by that fear, and that's why things aren't moving more quickly with a greater sense of urgency, because they've lost sight of the beacon of hope that these programs and projects can be, and the reality of how communities have embraced. We hear often this repeated fear that communities will be taken advantage of, that communities will not be participative in the right way, that what if this happens, what if that happens? And to your point, in all those debates, they don't actually bother to go and ask a community like yours, what did happen? And did any of these fears that they have actually come to pass? And so I feel that that we have an obligation really to and you're helping for you to be reminded of what it is that this market has been, and how different that is to all the other things that came before. Because we have an idea that I know from my conversations with many people in the global north, there's this notion that persists that is really a colonial aid mentality, that we have to figure out how to fix the problem. And we have to make sure it's perfect so that we don't get criticized by our citizens for how we're solving the problem. And in that dialogue, you're not part of the partnership in the way that you're saying, well, hang on, this one over here works perfectly well. So why aren't we doing more of this one over here? This one over here, we're not involved with at all. But it's that view that's missing in this debate that's happening. And I think you and members of your community have every right to be frustrated and have a right to be angry about why you're not part of that conversation, because you're the ones who are most directly and immediately impacted. There's no immediacy in the global north. That's one of our problems. We're not, the lemmings are not on the edge of the cliff yet. We're not falling off the cliff into the ocean of climate change at this point, although we see all the signs. All the signs but we have a way to adapt that minimizes the personal impacts and that allows us to forget the sense of urgency. But that's not a luxury that many communities in the global south have, and in my opinion, and that we need you. We absolutely want you to remind us, to be impatient, to be angry about the lack of urgency, because you're the ones who are facing these adaptation challenges today and for the last 20 years, as we've discussed. I think to a degree, you and your governments even need to force yourself into this conversation in a way, and we'll do our best to help. But do you feel that way? Do you feel like you're not invited? You're going to have to force your way into this conversation in order to get that perspective.
Yeah, indeed, Mike, as you have rightfully put it, looking at how things are happening, how the debate is moving on, even some of these top voices, they're not making reference to the global south. Yeah, it's like they're working on a very robotic system. Yeah, they are not thinking about the human beings that are part of that system, the human beings and the people of global south who are working tirelessly to make sure that we attain our net zero goals. And looking at one single project, like in Taita Taveta County, the Kasigau Corridor REDD project. This is a project that has created green jobs to lots of people from this place. This is a project which is being relied upon by more than 160,000 residents, a single project. And people have lots of hope in what the project is doing. Yeah. So what will happen to the lives of these people? Can we get down and talk to them and get their perspective on this matter? We need to look at the holistic view of the carbon market. We need to look at the holistic view of the players who are involved as far as climate change mitigation is concerned. We need to be practical. We don't need to be theoretical. There are things that can be observed with the naked eye. Yeah, there are contributors whom you can visit the field and see the good work that they are doing. So indeed, it's important that some of these decision makers in high offices, that they embrace a holistic view of looking at the climate change mitigation efforts that are being done. As much as we are looking at the elimination, what the companies are doing in the global north, we need also to look at the important contribution that is being made by people from the global south. Yeah, how do we handle this transition before we reach 2050? We need all the players on board. Yeah, and I think that is where people are missing the point. And maybe in your opinion, now going forward, how do we bring this conversation on track?
Well, I think the most important aspect of that is to figure out how to get your voice and voices like yours into that conversation. It's not theory that we need now, we need action. So yes. Pragmatically, how do we ensure the voice of communities like yours that have now, because there are many around the world that have experienced exactly. the benefits of the carbon market in greater or lesser degree. So how do we get that voice into the discussion, and not in a marketing sense, not in a look at this fantastic project, isn't it beautiful? But in a, wait a minute, we need the voices from those community members who are in that project to come forward and speak truthfully about the good, the bad, the hope, the fear from their view, and their urgency. And we need to find a way to make that happen, John. And you have my commitment that I won't rest until we figure that out, because without it, it is a one-sided conversation. It's not focused on pragmatism. And here's the thing. The one thing that we can all agree on, the UN, the EU, the UK, the US, the one thing we can all agree on in the global north is that stopping deforestation is the highest priority for climate mitigation. That exactly. It's the only way we have a hope of mitigating the worst impacts of climate change in a reasonable time frame. And yet, the dialogue that's happening is preventing financing of programs that had literally stopped deforestation. We believe that this needs to be about permanent change and in communities in the global south, and it needs to be about permanent access to finance and permanent access to new ways to live, not temporary. That these forests are equally at risk today as they were, and this is hard for people to believe in the North, and I'm a person who likes to be proud of the success we've had, but I'm aware of how fragile that success is. If we do not continue to provide solutions that you like and you ask for and that are part of your future, in your view, not ours, if we do not continue to and support you in that search for your future in light of climate change, then these victories that we've won in a very challenging environment side by side with you in the communities will be lost. And so that's my perspective. I would love to hear from your standpoint the reality of a community like yours and what this project and what the access to markets mean.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike, for sharing that and also for the question that you've posed. Indeed, we need to look at continuous improvement of the market, continuous improvement of the carbon credit system. Yeah. If there are any gaps, of course, we may not be having a perfect system yet. We need to bring our heads together and we see how we can progressively improve on the carbon market system, as opposed to demonizing it, something that we are seeing is happening at the global north. So we need to have our voices heard as far as improving the whole system is concerned. Again, we need permanent change, as you have rightfully said. Yeah, right now we are on track as far as the global south is concerned. If you look at forests being conserved, people appreciating the forests around, that is a positive change. If you look at socioeconomic empowerment, children going to school, that is positive change. But we have not hit the numbers yet of the number of kids in the villages who are supposed to be schooled. Yeah, there is still a lot of demand for education. If you look at the bursaries that are being disbursed through the Kasigau Corridor REDD+ project, when we started this project, we were talking of 3 million being disbursed as bursaries and scholarships. Now the figures have gone up. Yeah, in our locational carbon committee, the funds which are being managed by the people, the allocation has gone up to 18 million. Yeah, so many and many families whose children's dreams were shattered in terms of going to school, they now have hopes of going to school. Yeah, we had people being sponsored to go for their secondary school education, to go for their university and college education. Those are the kind of social transformation that we need to see. So if we stop midway, what will happen? What will happen to this kid who has gone to university or college first year and we stop at that point? The families, they don't have any other source of income to say. The impact of climate change, it has hit us very, very hard. So if we stop it at that point, does it mean that we are leaving global south for the dogs, or what does that mean? Yeah, so that is one of the candid conversations that we need to have. Those are some of the answers that we need, even from the likes of SBTI, to tell us what do they think about us. Yeah, and you know, it's not a matter of thinking that these are just monies being pumped to a system. These are monies that are rewarding people for the good conservation work that they are doing. And the impact can be seen. And as you have rightfully said, when you see a forest standing, there are efforts that have gone there into making that forest stand. If those efforts could not have gone towards that cause, all those forests could have been turned into charcoal. And you could be talking of tons and tons of carbon which have been released to the atmosphere. So they really need to appreciate that and support us in our efforts that we are really dedicated on to ensuring that we attain the net zero goal. So our contribution needs to be appreciated. They should not just focus on just industries alone, like the amount of carbon that they're emitting. We also need to look at now, how do we do proper carbon sequestration? How do you appreciate the role of carbon credit projects as far as mitigating the climate change impact is concerned? So my question to SBTI and everyone who is championing a debate against the carbon credit, what will happen to all these efforts if we demonize the carbon credit market now? Do they have an answer for that? I would really love to find one of them to answer me that question.
John, I wish I had a magic answer to that, but you're right. We need to find a way to make them listen to your voice and understand the consequences of their conversation and their debate. I do want, just quickly, because you've mentioned a number of times the importance of education, and it's actually something that when I first started Wildlife Works, I was less aware of. But now, over time, it's become very clear that the role that education has to play in the long-term sustainability of forests and wildlife. My view is it's become very clear that the future for the children in your community is not working the land the way their forefathers did and their forefathers before them. And it's not because they've changed their desire or their interest in working the land or being self-sufficient. It's because the climate has changed and they can't anymore. And so they need different answers for income, and it's happened everywhere in the world. And we see it happening. I see it happening also in Africa now. And so if you could just speak a minute to the link from the community's perspective between education. Why do you see education as the highest priority consistently when you are making decisions as a community on how money gets spent? What's that link in your mind between that education and your future?
Thank you for that very important question, Mike. Indeed, the trend has changed. They cannot rely on the traditional farming anymore because of climate change. Yeah, you can't go to a farm if there are no rains. So, and again, people have moved away from thinking that the only solution to some of these economic challenges is through deforestation and charcoal making. But now the thinking is about how do we empower ourselves, to put food on the table. And the only solution to that, the key to that quagmire, is education. So that's why you're finding so many families currently, they're advocating for their kids to go to school to acquire education and, get jobs. They have now resorted to empowering the young people so that they can sustain themselves. And that's why now we are having a scenario whereby if you go to a baraza, like a baraza is a meeting, a village meeting, or a town hall meeting, you will be surprised to find people standing there, young people, and they're saying, I'm a teacher. I teach at Kale Primary, and thanks to the REDD Plus project, because I'm a beneficiary of the carbon credit project, they took me to a teaching college, and here I am. I'm back to my community, giving back to the society through teaching. So, of course, looking at this young person, he is now able to put food on the table, not relying on handouts, but being actively involved in some of those empowerment activities, like getting employment. So people have really appreciated the fact that the carbon credit project is helping them, empowering them to be self-sustainable. Yeah. So they are looking at how they can make good use of the project, how they can make good use of the forest to empower themselves and including the future generation to have a complete transformation of the entire society. So that's why people have resorted to education. And I was even following one of the local WhatsApp groups. People are now discussing, looking at some of the skill set gaps that we have in our community. And some of them are saying, we now need to look at, because we have taken several of our children to school. They have some have specialized in teaching. We need to look at the health sector. Yeah, can we have doctors of our own from the Kasigau Corridor REDD Plus project? You know, that kind of a conversation. They now have hopes that they can take a village child to a medical school. Such a conversation could not have happened some 20 years ago. You know, in the past, people used to look for donor funds to do things.
I myself have experienced this shift in the governments of Africa, yes, where the governments of Africa are now standing forward and saying, you know what, this donor model, thank you, but you created the need for us to be dependent on you, and then you used that dependency to further your own goals in the global south. And now we are going to stand up and take charge of our own countries and our own people and their needs. And we'll ask you if we need help, and we'll tell you what we need help for, but we're done with you coming to us and telling us what we need money for and what to do with it. And I think that's something I've observed, because we deal at the government level too, in very quick period of time. It's shocking to the global north governments that they're not being welcomed in with open arms every time they offer to write a check for something they think is important. And I think that the point is, it's what they think is important that they've provided checks for in the past, and not what you think is important. And I guess that's been my observation of it. But taking it down from the government level to the community level, I would be very interested in understanding how that same realization of empowerment is happening at the community level, within your own community, within the Kasigau project, within Kenya, to what extent you feel comfortable saying that about Africa.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike, for that question and for the insights shared. Allow me to answer it in twofold. Yeah, there is also, apart from the donor model, there is also another aspect of people talking of neocolonialism. Yeah, so I'll mention the two in my response. So first and foremost, the local communities have appreciated the fact that this is a carbon market. Yeah, and for them to enroll in this market, it is voluntary. Yeah, so they have come to appreciate the fact that they can make a contribution in conserving the environment, in mitigating the climate change impact, and along the way, they're able to get some funding to further the conservation efforts and for socioeconomic empowerment. So that has resulted to now a mind shift, yeah, where initially they were waiting for donors to give them money. Now the conversation has changed, and we are talking of our money, our carbon market money, our carbon credit sale money. We have sold the credit. We are part of this system, and whatever we are investing, be it education, be it infrastructural development, it is us making that decision from the revenue that we have obtained from this market. So this is a really good model which empowers the local community now to own the conservation efforts happening, and they are viewing this as a contribution, which really is. They're being paid for the contribution that they have made in, the climate mitigation efforts. So that has been really motivating from the local community point of view, where now they can talk of, they're not talking of, we have been given some donation by Wildlife Works. No, they are talking of, we have been given our monies, yeah, because we are part of this market, we are conserving. So we have been given our share as a community, and we're able to sit down through the locational carbon committee, because we have a structure where it is able to sit down, consult the community through a public participation process on how the monies are supposed to be invested. Even some of the decisions of, raising the allocation for education, for bursaries, it is done in a participatory process. So they have come to appreciate the fact that we don't need to be relying on donations. Yeah, we can earn monies through our own sweat, through our own efforts, and it's able to take us to the next level as far as socioeconomic empowerment is concerned. Again, another point is there has been some allegations and conversation around some quarters feeling like this was a form of neocolonialism, which is not the case. Yeah. Here we are talking of, again, willing buyer, willing seller. We have not given our land to anybody. Some people are saying that, you have given out your land to foreigners to manage it for you, or they're stopping you from doing your investment in that particular piece of land. No, we have gotten into this arrangement, which is voluntarily. We have accepted as a community because we see the benefit that comes from it. We have not sold our land. We still maintain the ownership of the land. And I think this is a very important point, because I saw that some of the naysayers out there in the global space were saying that we have given out our land. No, we haven't. If you look at the local level, we still have our title deeds. All the landowners who have voluntarily participated or enrolled themselves in the carbon space, in the carbon market, they have the title deeds. They have gotten into those contracts knowing the benefit that comes from it. Yeah. So I wanted to clear the air as far as neocolonialism is concerned. The people who should be complaining of neocolonialism should be us, people from the global south, and we should not be hearing anyone from the global north talking of neocolonialism. It is us who are supposed to complain. We are the wearer of the shoe. So if there is any complaint, it should come from us and not from somebody seated at the comfort of his or her office in the global north saying that the carbon market is promoting neocolonialism. No. We are in this arrangement knowing that we are equal partners contributing to the net zero goals as clearly documented in the Paris Agreement, and we are reaping from the benefits of this partnership. And we don't want the arrangement to be touched. That's why it pains us a lot when we're having seeing conversations happening in the global space without having our voices heard. And we should not allow one bad actor or 2-3 bad actors in the carbon space to bring down the whole system. That is something that we should not allow. Again, there have been issues to do with how maybe the carbon market needs to enhance transparency and accountability. Such a conversation has been there. So perhaps maybe to ask you this question, in your perspective, what could be the best way of weeding out or making sure that some of these bad actors have towed the line as far as embracing the good carbon market practices and protocols are concerned? That would be my first question to you. And then the last one is, when it comes to transparency and accountability, what do you feel needs to be done as far as the concerns that are being raised at the global space are concerned to enhance transparency and accountability?
Thank you, John. I sometimes recently have my own questions about the suitability of the market broadly as a mechanism, because there's a famous quote from Winston Churchill, who's a famous English leader from the Second World War, who at that time was talking about political systems and said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. And so I often have hijacked that to say that, well, markets are the worst form of conservation finance except for all the others, because what we know to be true is that it's the only one that has the scale needed to provide this transition to a future that is carbon free and that is just and equal across the planet. It's the only one that has the scale of financing for that. But it comes with a lot of challenges. Anytime you hang out a market shingle, a lot of people just think that's just about how they can make money with no risk. And so a lot of the market participants that join any market, including the carbon market, are people who come to think they're going to make money and they want to reduce their risk as much as possible. That's what people that are investing in things want to do. But those characteristics do not let them understand the gravity and the seriousness and the global issue. There's sort of a tragedy of the commons here where each person that's involved in the carbon market can think they're not responsible for the correct and just solution to be delivered across the world. But if they all begin to think that, or a majority of them think that, then the market starts behaving in unjust ways and inequitable ways and starts to favor only the money and not actually the results that we all need and the outcomes that are just and equitable. So I think the market itself has some structural challenges which need to be addressed, which are being addressed slowly by people being reminded that a market needs two sets of willing participants. It needs the willing buyers and it needs the willing sellers. Yeah. And there's not been enough of the willing sellers' voice in the discussion about how this market should evolve. So I think that will help to solve that problem. Will be getting the reminding people of the willing seller. I will say though that the market has not been good at policing itself against individual transgressors. Markets always attract opportunists that want to make money and not do the right thing, or want to make money and cheat. And that's true of any market in history. And so the market hasn't done a good enough job of policing itself for the individual occurrences. And as a result, there's been these broad, sweeping statements about the market that do not reflect the majority of action, which is legitimate and which is following the rules and which is genuinely trying to find equitable solutions for communities like yours. And I think that is a challenge. How do we separate those two needs? How do we really refocus on having a system that is self-policing and has barriers to entry so that the bad actors don't show up in the first place, and that if they do show up, they are easily found and they're easily excluded from the discussion and from participation. But we don't paint the whole market with one brush based on the actions of a few. And so that's critically important. It's difficult to see exactly. In the end, we believe the standard organizations in the voluntary market are the ones who need to do a much better job of policing their own standard and the use of their standard by people within the market, because it's very difficult. Once you start going higher and higher away from individual actions by individual people, the solutions get very confused and cloudy. And that's one of the challenges of the carbon market. Is it is enormous, and it covers everything from protecting forests to getting credit for painting your aircraft more frequently so it has less resistance when it's flying. These are enormous differences, but these are all part of the conversation of the carbon market. And I think what we need to do in this space, in the sector of avoiding deforestation, we need to keep drawing people back to the land. We need to keep drawing people back to the real communities that live on that land and to solutions that they want to see, and help to police the market to ensure that they get equitable solutions and not solutions that are not in their best interest. Transparency is a key to that. We need to make sure the system is reflecting. If somebody wants to look, they can see exactly what's going on in your community without visiting. Of course, they can always visit your community, and I would highly recommend anybody does. They take those nature walks with you, John. But in the end, I think that to see your reality. But in the end, we need to find ways to ensure there's transparency without people all having to come and visit. And so there has to be a system of trust and information. And that's the role that Wildlife Works can play in bringing forward in the making people feel they're in your community, even if they're not, making people hear your voice directly, making people be in a baraza and sit as if they were in a baraza virtually and understand how that what is that thing that we're talking about that the community uses to make decisions, and then what does the forest look like now inside the protected forest of your project, and what does the land look like outside of that, at that hard boundary between the forest that you've agreed to put into the project and the land that you need to continue to try and work for food. So I think transparency, we are working on ways to bring transparency to our work and and we of course have to be held accountable to be a good actor in the space. But we also have to have people understand that, as you pointed out, this project involves 160,000 community members. A community is not a thing. It's not a community is 160,000 people who, and so to act as if rules can be made and everyone in a community will automatically follow those rules is just naive. And it's certainly something that we wouldn't expect of our own communities. But because we don't have visibility and knowledge of your communities, we impose different rules and different expectations on your community. And I think that willingness to understand the complexity of these projects, that we're moving millions of people by their own will and by their own desire to a new way of life in the next few decades. And if we don't succeed in doing that, we will lose the forests and we will lose the wildlife. In my opinion, the only way we are going to have a future for forests and wildlife in the global south, if we do find solutions that work for you and your community, that are permanent and lasting. What strikes me as what has happened is that continuous improvement has been sacrificed at the altar of ideology and the idea that there's a better solution without actually having a better solution that can replace the current one. Because we've got to be working together on this solution for the next 30 years. And if we're going to pull through as communities around the world to a viable, sustainable future that is carbon-free in 2050. So I very much appreciate the insight you've given me and the continued enthusiasm in the community despite the challenges that we're facing. And I very much hope we can bring good news to your community soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike, for sharing your sentiments on that pertinent issue. And I must say that I'm hopeful right now, because before we started this conversation, I felt like I had a lot bottled up in me, because a conversation is happening at the national, at the global level. There is no deliberate effort being made by the global north to listen to our voices. And one of the takeaways of this conversation, again, we need to advocate for continuous improvement of the carbon credit system. That one must be done as opposed to demonizing the whole system. That will not work for us. That will not work for the Paris Agreement. It will work against us attaining the net zero goal. Again, it's important that the global north appreciates the significant benefits of the carbon market system. They need to take their time. If not visiting, we are available. Some of us can be contacted virtually, and we can share our voices on what is happening on the ground. They can equally come and see for themselves and hear out the local people through the barazas, as you have rightfully said. And I know if some of them hears the word baraza, they may be curious to see what a baraza is. So I welcome them wholeheartedly to come to Marungu location in Taita Taveta County and see what a baraza is and hear it from our people. And indeed, all the players in the carbon market system, we need to have a renewed focus on this agenda. By so doing, I'm sure that the carbon market will be able to deliver on the promises that have been made to the local community, and it will contribute immensely towards the attainment of the global climate goals.